Hello, and welcome to another episode of Professional Book Girl. My name is Kayla, and I read a ton of books so that I can read the best to you that know, so I can recommend the best to you. And today is very exciting because it is our April book club episode. I cannot believe, oh my God, no, it's our May book club episode. What is going on with me today? I can't believe that. I think that's why I just messed up. I honestly can't believe it's already the May book club. This was our 5th book club, which is just so crazy and so exciting. So if you are new to PBG, once a month, in the beginning of every month, I choose a book that we will all read on our own time. And then at the end of the month, I put out this episode you're listening to now, where I give my review of the book with all of my full thoughts. It contains every single spoiler you can imagine. So if you have not yet read Funny Story by Emily Henry, which was our May book club pick, then I wouldn't listen to this episode. Come back and listen once you have read it. And yeah, I feel like we are just going to dive in. There's some things I want to talk about before I get through all of my notes. So I mentioned when I announced that this was the book club pick that I did go back and forth about choosing it. And honestly, part of that is because I knew I wanted to read it when it came out. I didn't want to wait until the end of the month, which is what I typically do. I typically read and record the episode like the week it's going to come out, so my thoughts are super fresh. I am recording this back in time, which is in the beginning of May, which is why I like messed up what month it is also. I'm glad I chose this one because I loved it so fucking much. I was nervous though going into it, and I thought that this one would be a good one to choose because I know so many of us love and read Emily Henry. If you have not yet read Emily Henry, I hope that I got you to finally pick one of her books up. And I know that for a lot of us, some of her books tend to be hit or miss. And look, her misses are still better than like 90% of the romance books that I read. There's just something about her writing and her storytelling that just sets her so apart from so many other books. But I haven't loved all of her books, which I think is an okay thing to say, obviously. And it's funny with her, it's kind of a thing. And people tend to be in every other, which is what I am, or have like people who love this book will also love this book. So for me, my number one Emily Henry book is Book Lovers. That is still true after reading this one. I just read that when I was going through things that the character was also going through. And I was obsessed with the love story, but I was also obsessed with the family aspect. And it just really hit home for me. And I think I can now say Funny Story is my second favorite, which we're going to get into, obviously, but for the same reason. The family things in this book is really what drove this home for me. It was a little too relatable, and there were so many parts where I wrote down so many quotes, which I don't do, and I kept rereading things, and it just really made me feel seen in the same way that Book Lovers did. And I just love this book so much. And then my third favorite is Beach Read, which was her first book and my first from her. I read that in the beginning of COVID in 2020. And this was around the time when I wasn't really reading romance books. And in 2019 for a book club, I read The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren, and I was obsessed with it. And then I slowly started picking up romance books. I went into like Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and like that whole the Brown Sisters series. But it was after I read Beach Read where I was like, oh, I need to be reading more of these. And it really kicked off my romance journey. And now romance is one of my favorite genres. And then I think my least two are kind of tied. Like I just did not love People We Meet on Vacation and Happy Place. Happy Place specifically, it's more fresh in my mind because that was her book that came out last year. And I was just so frustrated with the characters because I hate miscommunication. And it was just one giant miscommunication trope. But yeah, I loved this one so much, which I honestly wasn't sure if I would because I wasn't immediately into the main guy. And this is really I can't recall any other book where I had to be won over by the main character, and I was won over. You don't have to always love the love interest, but in this one I started off not really liking him, and then I came around to be obsessed with him. So that was a good thing. So I'm going to, if this is your first PBG book club episode, Last month was a little bit different because I was joined by the author, which I thought was very fun to kind of combine the interview with the full spoiler review. I'm going to start off right now just telling you what the book's about, and then I'm going to go through my notes, and they don't make sense. So I'm going to be just like saying random phrases. Like the first note I wrote is pink exclamation point. So it's a little chaotic, but I like kind of giving you guys my stream of consciousness as I was reading it. I knew this was the book club pick when I read this book, so I did take notes, and the book club books are the only books I take notes on. And I sometimes it's a little annoying because I'll like keep stopping. Like in this one, I took so many notes, but it's kind of a fun way to experience it. And just now I was like looking through them again, and I was like, oh yeah, like all of these things that like really stood out to me. So the main premise of Funny Story by Emily Henry is Daphne, our main girl, she thought she was with her perfect fiance, the love of her life, and he breaks up with her right before their wedding to get back together with his childhood best friend. And she has moved to this like really charming town in coastal Maine where he is from. She left her whole life in Virginia behind. She has her dream job there as a children's librarian. And he's like, you have to leave the house. Like, I'll move out for a week so you can move out. And she has nowhere to go because her whole life there was around him. She does not have her own life and her own identity there. And she moves in with the ex of the childhood friend. So the childhood friend, her name was Petra. And she moves in with his ex, Miles, and they're just roommates. And obviously they fall in love. And that is our book. So the first note that I wrote is pink, and I was obsessed because when you took the dust jacket off of the hardcover book, it was a really pretty light pink, like my favorite shade of pink, and it matched all of the decor in my room, and I just loved it. I thought it was so cute. So as I started reading, the book opens up and she said that she always loved the way that Peter told how they met, and she recounted, and they had like this really cute meet cute moment in a park. And my first note that I wrote was, of course, Peter's blonde. No offense to any blondes listening, I've never I'm not into blondes. Like it's just not my thing. It's never been for me. I've never had a crush on a blonde. Although I think recently I was like, oh, I can't believe I have a crush on him and he's blonde. And now I can't even remember who it is. Like Austin Butler's kind of more of like a blonde, and I would say Chris Hemsworth is too. So those are the two that I'm thinking of that potentially could be blondes I'm interested in. Yeah, like blondes just don't do it for me. And I was like, oh, of course he's a blonde. And Peter's whole thing is that he's from this wealthy family, and they're very close knit, and Daphne wanted that. She was raised by a single mother who she's very close with, but she wanted the big family thing. And Peter, aside from the fact that he was blonde, was probably the guy that I would go for versus someone like Miles. He's very regimented, he loves his routine, and that's how I am too. Some of his health and fitness stuff I would have been like, okay, you do that, I'm gonna have a brownie. But I don't know, he is more on paper my type. So it made reading this a little bit interesting, but there were so many things that immediately I picked up on. I did not like the fact that she moved her life for him and built her whole life around him, and did not branch out and start forming her own life until she literally was forced to. And it was interesting to me because she was raised by a single mother, and that she still fell into that. And we're going to talk about my life a lot on this because I related way too much to the parent aspect of it. But my parents split when I was 15, and my mom, her whole life was being a mother and a wife, and that is what she always wanted, which is great for her. And I saw her have to find her own identity outside of her relationship in her 40s, and I always was like, that would never be me. And so it was kind of interesting for me to read Daphne, whereas her mom always had her own life and identity, and to see her kind of just turn her whole life into being about this guy who obviously then turned out to be an asshole. So the next note I wrote, so we know that Peter left Daphne for his childhood best friend Petra, who is gorgeous supermodel, cool girl, but so bohemian, but it's chic on her because she's so rich. And he always said to Daphne, you don't have to worry about her. We're just friends. We're just friends. We're just friends. And she goes on his bachelor trip, and that's when they decide to get together, which was insane. And in the beginning of the book, at one point, Daphne is scrolling through Petra's social media, which I thought was so real. And I put like a dash, I look through people's windows, the new song by Taylor Swift. It just felt like very fitting for that exact situation, because I love thinking about that song through the lens of stalking somebody on social media. So then I wrote LOL all by myself playing, because our first intro to Miles is in the apartment and he's playing like this sad breakup music. He's been watching a lot of Bridget Jones' Diary, and he's like smoking, like he's a stoner, at least in the beginning. That's the assumption they give you. And then I wrote LOL as she moved in with Petra's ex, because I guess I didn't put it together that that's what was going to happen in this book. And I thought that whole concept was really interesting and funny, but at first I was like, surely this isn't the love interest. Like, I was being really judgy at first, obviously, and I came around to really love him, but I was like, no, like there's no way this guy who just seems like a loser stoner is our guy. But you know, I'm eating my own words, because I came to be obsessed with him. So I thought it was like insane the way Peter broke up with Daphne, how he comes home from his bachelor party and is just like, I'm calling off the wedding, I'm with Petra. And it was just really, really wild and ridiculous to me. And the whole thing with the house was crazy too, like how her name was never on the house. And I feel like it just goes back to, her not realizing that he would ever leave her, but also just she was so trusting of this guy. I always think of like a Teresa Giudice, who was just signing papers her husband presented her with and trusted him fully, and then got screwed and had to go to prison. And I wrote this quote: my mom was the only permanent thing in my life. I really loved her relationship with her mom, how she would call her mom to vent. That was very, very familiar to me. And I can totally relate to that quote. That's why I wrote it. My mom was the only permanent thing in my life. These two women have gone through so much together, and it really shaped their relationship. And that comes through on the page, despite the fact that Daphne has chosen a different path than her mom has, which is obviously fine. I was just surprised that she was so willing to tie her whole life to this man when her mom was kind of the opposite. Uh, so I wrote that I hate how Miles texts, because we see them texting each other as roommates. And this is a fun fact about me. I love seeing how people text. It's something I'm kind of obsessed with. It tells you so much about a person. And there's been these few insights with celebrities where we can see how they text. Like a year or so ago, Lorde posted a text from Taylor Swift, and I was like, oh my God, like just to see the capitalization and the type of punctuation. And Taylor's made sense to me. And the other one that comes to mind, celebrity wise, I forgot how we saw this. I think it might have been in like a court doc or something, but we got to see how Prince Harry texts, and I will never get over it. Like, he doesn't type out the full word you, he just puts the letter, which I feel like is very telling for his age, because he started texting when you had to like press the button 3 times to get a letter, and he used the ghost emoji so much, and I was like I'll never get over that. And I just feel like when you see how somebody sends a text message, it's just like such an interesting psychosis into like look into their mind, and I like love it. And I hated how Miles texted. Like, if this was a guy I was talking to, I would like a little bit of like a red flag. Like, I don't like how you text. The next thing that I wrote is I loved the kids. I love Daphne's job and her passion for being a librarian, how they talk about a lot in the books about how books and her library specifically growing up it was a refuge for her. And I loved the way she talked about her regulars that come in, the girl Maya, who she knows is an introvert and doesn't have a lot of friends, and she picks these books for her, so they have a book club. And then by the end of the book, at the giant readathon, which we are up to for the penultimate I don't know how you say that word, event, she finds a friend, and Daphne is like, oh, our book club like might be over now. And I just really, really loved that. The story hour parts I really loved. It made me be like, should I move to like a small coastal town and be a librarian? I wrote that. So Daphne says she's old enough to have a daughter named Renesmee. And I was cracking up at this because when I worked in fashion, I worked at a kids brand and it was a subscription box. So if I ever had to like look in on someone's order, I could see the kid's name. And I will never forget the first time I saw a Renesmee. And I was like, I cannot believe we are at this point in time already that the Renesmees are like in school. And there were quite a few. And then when I started seeing some Khaleesi's come in, there were a few Hermione's. It was just like very funny to me. So by this point in time, when I was reading, I still wasn't super sure how I felt about it. And I do think a book like this, where it's an author that I know I love, but is hit or miss for me, I go into it a bit more critically. And I, at first, had a harder time slipping into the story. I do think the fact that I was taking notes, like, played a role in that because I kept having to pull out my phone. And then I got to a point where I was like, I didn't want to look at my phone, but I knew I needed to write the notes. So I would like at the end of every few chapters, like try to remember everything that stood out to me. So that way I could just stay in the story. But it wasn't until Daphne and Miles get invited to Peter and Petra's wedding that I was like, oh, fuck. Like, now I love this. And I was like, this is like psychotic behavior. Like, why? In what world? Like, why would they invite them? Specifically, like for Daphne, who is engaged to this man and they were about to be married. And then I loved that they decided to fake dating is my favorite trope. So immediately I was like, oh, okay, I'm buckled up. Like I'm ready. I'm in. And that they were going to like go to the wedding together. I thought it was so funny. And the next thing that I wrote, sorry, I'm just skipping ahead a second because the next thing I wrote after that was Peter, that idiot, calling her. I guess he called her to like see about the invite or whatever, but love the fake dating thing. It's my favorite trope. Okay. So at some point, and I can't exactly remember what caused this, but Miles kisses her on the top of her head. And I am realizing that I love this move because in Right on Cue, our last month's book club pick, if you didn't read it, it was about two actors and them like filming a movie together, and they're about to film a sex scene, and they're very nervous. And before they start, like he kisses her on top of the head, and I was freaking out. Like I feel like it's very sweet. Like when he did that, I was like, okay, like maybe I like this guy now. And actually, the next thing that I wrote is 50 pages in. I can't tell my opinion on Miles. He reminds me of a Brooklyn guy, not derogatory. I don't like that he doesn't have social media, but he's funny and sweet. So shrug emoji. And I forgot that he was no social media. That for me, like, if I'm talking to a guy, it's like slightly a little bit of a red flag because especially when you're getting to know someone, you want to be able to look at their social media, and with what I do, like this and K Red What, and actually like my real job in the real world is social media. And a lot of times when you're like, a lot of times, like period, in the world and culture, what I do as a social media manager is looked down upon specifically by a lot of men because they don't understand the power of social media in the way that I think women do a bit more. And they tend to kind of just like class it as like stupid young girls working in social media. And I've hit that wall. I've met that person so many times in my career. And then when you meet a guy who doesn't have social and you're trying to get to know him and you tell him you do social, let alone forget about K Red What, they just don't understand it. Like, yeah, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But so that was like a giant red flag for me, even though I'm like not dating Miles, obviously, but I was like, like, I don't know. Because at this point, I still wasn't sure how I felt about him, but he was starting to win me over because I said he's funny and sweet. Then we start to see Daphne at work and her kind of like meeting people, and she meets this friend, Ashley. And I wrote, I cannot relate to her not wanting to tell Ashley about her trauma because I am going to tell you some of my trauma on this episode. I am always like, I just meet someone, I'll be like, let's like share our top 3 traumas. Like I feel like that's how you get to know somebody. And I'm such an open person. I feel like maybe you guys know that. Even if you think there's a lot I don't share, like I share a lot about myself on the internet and anyone I meet. Like I'm such an oversharer. So her not wanting to talk about what happened with like Peter was kind of crazy to me. Cause it's like your life blew up and you're trying to recover and form your own life, and now you're not even going to like tell this person you're trying to befriend this like major event. Like I didn't get that. So her and Ashley go to the winery where Miles works, and afterwards he takes her out and they go to this 50s diner and then to the beach. And this really is when I was starting to be like, oh, like I want to do that so bad. Like I thought that was so cute. And I love that he starts taking her on this tour of this town because she uprooted her life for Peter and never even explored where she lived. And Miles is also a transplant there, but it's very clear that he loves it there and put down roots. So I really loved that he decided to take Daphne and show her this place where she lives. And he doesn't even realize that she has his countdown to when she's leaving. After this readathon that she's planning at work, she's ready to leave town and like she's applying to jobs literally anywhere else. And I don't know, I just really love that then I can't speak, that's what they then were doing. Like their friendship and then eventual relationship really formed because he was showing her this place that he loves. And we learned something really fucked up. So Daphne's best friend is this girl named Sadie, and Sadie's boyfriend was close with Peter, and the 4 of them, they would do things together. And Daphne has felt distance from Sadie since the breakup because Sadie says she's not taking sides in the breakup. And that pissed me off so much because actually, fun fact about life, when you say you're not taking sides, you're taking a side. Like if someone has clearly wronged you the way Peter clearly wronged Daphne, Sadie not taking Daphne's side is taking Peter's side essentially, because then you're like excusing what he did, and like that is so fucked up. So I was like, I hate this girl. And so then though Daphne, we move on from that point for a bit. Daphne is exploring the town more. She starts going into a coffee shop. I thought it was really cute, and the people there recognize her and she became a regular. And she sees this kind of like fairy tale house and she imagines this life in it. And I wrote, I think she's going to buy the house, which TBD for the end. But I loved the idea that then she started imagining her life there and realizing that maybe she can stay here and have a life outside of Peter. And then Miles comes to story hour, which I just thought was so fucking cute, and the way that he just showed up for her in this moment. And he's kind of like I was picturing him as like a Brooklyn hipster, but like this like doofus kind of like this like silly guy, which is so not anything I've ever been into. But I just thought it was so sweet how he showed up for this part of her job that obviously she loves, but he was so into it and so impressed. And she even says like, I wasn't even doing anything special, but it was just really sweet. And I again wrote, I really, really love the kids' parts. And I love that he's showing her around the town and wants her to invest in her life there. And I feel like her investing in her life in the town is really her investing in her life, period, because the vibe so far has been that she just invested everything in Peter and that relationship. And then LOL, of course, they ran into Peter. So Miles is taking Daphne to like these farm stands. And of course, all the old ladies are obsessed with Miles. And they're at this like farm and they see Peter. And I was of course they do. And I wrote, OMG, fuck you, Peter, warning her off Miles. I feel like Peter's impression of Miles is kind of similar to the impression that I originally had of Miles. And maybe that's why I said in the beginning, Peter would be the guy that I go for. But we're getting to know Miles as Daphne is. And I didn't like the way Peter was talking about him. And when he clearly is like, he's just like such a judgmental rich asshole. And then of course they have like this kiss outside to like distract him, and then Peter doesn't even see, which I thought was so funny. And it was like this big moment of this kiss. And the next thing I wrote is that I really liked how Emily Henry wrote about the reality of finding friends as an adult. I'm sure all of you listening know this, like it is not an easy thing to do. And in this book, we really see Daphne trying and going through these trials and tribulations as she's trying to establish herself in this town and make more friends. And it was just really, really realistic. So the two of them they're hanging out more with their friends. They're flirty. It's fun. They start watching these movies together. And this is what I wrote when he pulls her into his lap and they talk about her lab. I love this so much. So I loved the like they're on the couch and then he pulls her into his lap. I just thought that was like so hot. And he comments on her laugh because he was like that. He says something about like that was a real laugh. And she says how she would kind of like has different laughs for different situations, and I think that's very realistic. And I just loved how he was picking up on the different laughs that she has and kind of saying like, don't be ashamed of your real laugh. Like I just thought it was really sweet. And this is when I was really starting to fall for Miles and realize like how thoughtful he is, and he just pays attention and makes her feel special, and goes back to coming to the story hour. And it's just like I was like, oh, like I loved it. And then they for their next adventure they go kayaking, and I really loved this scene. It was very atmospheric to me. Like I could picture them kayaking, which like personally that's a nightmare for me. But I just really really loved that scene. And then we kind of get back into the Daphne and Sadie of it all, and we learn about when they first met. And they met in a class in either high school or college, and the character had said like, what Jane Austen character are you guys? And I loved that Daphne and Sadie saying they were Charlotte and Lydia from Pride and Prejudice. I thought that was just funny. And then we meet Miles's sister. So he had mentioned a sister in the past, and then he mentioned that well, he doesn't mention it, but you see him kind of like going off to like have phone calls. And I think in one of the cute moments, I think it might have been that moment I mentioned when he pulls her into his lap on the couch, his phone rings and he's like, I have to get this. And I came to really love the sister. She stressed me out a little bit. Like she was a little too chaotic for me, but I love reading about siblings, and I thought their relationship was so sweet. And I have a younger brother, but I've always like I like reading about the dynamic of an older brother, I think because I just don't have that. And I thought he was a really great brother to her, even though we learn all of these traumatic things about their childhood and their family, which I will get into. And so in their apartment, Daphne had put up this calendar on the fridge so that they always knew what each other was up to, which was like a little bit crazy to me. Like I have two roommates and we don't do that, but he started adding things to the calendar, which I really loved. And I love that he was like not humoring her, but he knew that those things made her feel better and she wanted to know what was going on. And so he was doing that. And so the next thing that I wrote is I think I love Miles, but I'm not obsessed because I'm like Daphne, and unorganized people like him stress me out. So I feel like I just, in the whole, like looking back now as I'm talking about it, I kind of had the same trajectory as Daphne did with Miles. He was stressing me the fuck out. I could not be with somebody like that. Like, even though I came to be obsessed with him, like, I would need him to like get a little bit more organized and get some more structure and routine in there a bit. But yeah, I was having the same falling for Miles as Daphne did, I guess. And then, so a quote that I wrote, no one can repress negative emotions like him, which was the sister, I think her name was Julia, talking about Miles. And that was interesting to me because up until this point, Miles has just been this kind of like, he just seems like happy-go-lucky, like chill guy vibes. But this is when you start seeing the human side of him and you realize that things do really bother him. Although I know in the beginning we met him and he was heartbroken and depressed from his breakup from Petra, but he seemed to like, besides that, things seemed to really roll off of his back. So I really liked that. Then this is when we start learning a bit more about their family, and their mom, it seems like, was pretty abusive, and the dad would just kind of like, he was absent even though he was there. And Miles is 10 years older than her. And after he moved out of the house, he moved to a city close by until she went to college. So that way he could be there for her, which I thought was really sweet. And he would every weekend take her to McDonald's. And I just thought that was so cute. And like, I really loved that. And I loved their relationship. And I loved the way that they spoke to each other. And it made me love this is when I really I feel like at this point you guys just know I'm in love with Miles, but this made me even see him in such a different light because yeah, I just loved it. I loved it. There's a Mamma Mia reference, which I don't remember what it. Oh, it was because the sister broke up with this guy because he said Mamma Mia 2 is better than Mamma Mia 1, which obviously that is incorrect. Like the original Mamma Mia is better, but I love any Mamma Mia reference because, as I've mentioned on a previous episode, if you missed it, I'm having a Mamma Mia themed 30th birthday party. So it's my favorite movie. Just love a Mamma Mia reference. I actually ordered my handmaids today, and they are so cute. So I love that. So then they what is this? Okay, so then they are all at this brewery. Miles, Daphne, Ashley, the friend, and Julia, the sister. And I wrote, I'm smiling at them on the dance floor, him coming back after the bachelorette kiss. So there's this bachelorette party at the brewery, and Miles is that guy that like everyone is in love with, and he's just like a magnet to people, and people gravitate towards him naturally. So they're at this brewery, and there's a bachelorette party there, and they had like a truth or dare thing, I guess, and someone had to kiss someone, and they kiss him, and they have like this. Daphne and Miles have this sweet moment on the dance floor, and this is I wrote down this quote. The moment felt like a held breath or a soap bubble, something that can't last, that has to break one way or another. And I just love that. Like this is when I really was like, oh, like the way Emily Henry writes is just so good and so real. And then we learn that Sadie, the best friend, is hanging out with Peter and Petra. And this really pissed me off. And I was like, we need to just let her go, cut her out. So as the book goes on, Daphne starts developing this relationship with Ashley, who we learn is divorced. And I love that her divorce story. It was really interesting to me. She left her husband, not because anything bad happened, but she realized that they just weren't really like it for each other anymore. Like no one cheated. It wasn't like that, but she wanted more. And there's this thing where she said like she wanted to go to Portugal and he like didn't understand why or something like that. And she was like, I don't know. But I liked the reason why like she left him. And she says to Daphne, like, oh, don't tell me you're a wee girl. And this was a new term for me. And I actually really liked this. And it really resonated with me because I'm at this age now that a lot of my friends and people in my life are in these long-term serious relationships. And when your friends get into these relationships, it's interesting how suddenly it does become a we, and you can love their partner, but you still want just your friend. And the way that Ashley explained that to Daphne also hit me in the sense of I've never been this person, but we all know people who just like cannot be alone. They always need to be doing something with someone, which is fine, I guess. But I think it's important to be able to be like comfortable in your own company. And I am so not a we girl. I'm an I girl. And I loved that Ashley presented that to Daphne because as she is, even though she's falling in love with Miles in the process, she really is finding her own relationship with herself. And I think that is the most important relationship in this book. But as Ashley and Daphne's friendship goes on, she brings her to this poker night she has, which is like the women from the farm stand and the elderly guy who works at the library. And I just thought that scene was really fun. I really enjoyed that. So their next adventure, Miles is taking her, it's like a surprise, and it turns out to be a prom, which I was obsessed with. And I wrote so high school vibes, like the Taylor Swift song. And they're there because he's like, oh, we're going to fundraise for the readathon. And I love that he helped her come out of her bubble, and the way that he would chat her up and talk about what an amazing thing she was doing is, and he wasn't dismissive of it. And it was really sweet. But then we also saw her become more comfortable forming new relationships, getting the things she needed for the readathon. The next thing that I wrote is I really love this take on my favorite trope, which is the fake dating thing. And then, like she says, as usual, Miles knows everyone, which I thought was just very funny because of what we're learning about him. And everybody has those people in their lives wherever they go, they know somebody. My dad is one of those people. One of my best friends from high school is one of those people. We would like call her the mayor. But I really loved the way that they portrayed it. And then at the prom, he ends up opening more about the things with his mom and his family. And I thought that was like a sweet moment. And they had this whole conversation about how he like doesn't read. And obviously books are so important to her. And he starts listening to audiobooks and he was listening to Narnia. And I was dying at his text. Like he said, Edmund needs to chill. And I was like, I was cracking up when I read that. And I thought it was so sweet. And also how he was starting to do something that she loves so that they can bond over it. And I wrote, this book feels like summer. I'm smiling so much. The next major plot thing that happens is Julia decides she's moving to the town. Um, and this was like funny to me, but like the way she did it was so chaotic and stressed me out. But I was like, okay, I liked Julia and I liked seeing her with Miles and Daphne. So I was happy that she was moving there and was going to stick around. So the next thing I wrote is a quote, and I'm assuming this is on the night when Ashley and Julia are there and they're talking about like what's going on with Daphne and Miles. And the quote is, "It's not complicated. I want him, I like him, and I care about him enough to push the first two thoughts aside," which I thought was also like, for like they're fake dating and they're obviously both falling for each other, but it's also kind of this forbidden romance at this point. But then like comedic break, Julia opens a closet and it's Daphne's wedding closet and it just explodes and it has the favors and all the like decorations and everything and her wedding dress, and they like tell her to to try on the dress. And then she comes out in it and they both had left and just Miles is there. And I was hysterical laughing. I thought this scene was so funny. And then he's like helping her get out of it because she's stuck in it. And I was like, I could just picture this in like a show or a movie or something. Like it was so funny. And one of them says, I think Daphne might have said to him, "Tell me something awful." And it just reminded me of I Hate It Here by Taylor Swift. But I really love that. And then the next thing that happened, the next little outing they have, he surprises her by taking her to a book signing, which I thought was so, so sweet. And the next main plot point is her dad. So up until this point, we knew that he was absent. She was raised just by her mom and he would kind of flit in and out of her life. And she comes home one day and the dad is there with his new wife, Starfire. The next thing I wrote, I'm laughing out loud so much. This really is a funny story. And that is how I've been explaining it to people in the real world. I was like, no, it's actually a funny story is a funny story because it was hysterical. So Starfire starts telling them about how she went to like this psychic or something who told her that in her past life she was an heiress on the Titanic, and then tells her the whole plot of the Titanic movie, and they're all looking at her and they're like it was just so funny. Like Starfire cracked me up. But this is when so before the dad showed up, I was like, oh, I love this book. But the things with the dad are really what made it 5 stars for me. And I'm about to just read out a bunch of quotes that I wrote because this hit so hard. Like it just like, I'm so glad I read this after I've gone through the amount of therapy that I have and have had these hard conversations with my dad, and that we are kind of on the other end of it. Because if I didn't, I would actually have not been okay reading this, and I would have really been triggered and it would have been a lot. But it was actually an interesting like therapy exercise, I guess, to read what happens between her and her dad in this book, and the quotes that I'm going to read off to you that stood out to me so much will tell you a lot about my situation. But it was so nice to read them and know I'm on the other side of it, because at this point in my life and for the last few years, really, I have the best relationship with my dad that I've ever had in my entire life. And I never imagined we would get here. And I'm so grateful that we are. And my whole life felt like there was this weight on my shoulder because this relationship was just always toxic and like a dark cloud over me. And it always bothered me that it was like that. And I think Daphne has the same experience, and you can like pretend as much as you want to, but it's something that will always bother you. So it was really meaningful to me to read about Daphne and her dad, but to also read about Miles. And I got not like Daphne gets through everything with her dad on her own, but her support system in Miles was really, really sweet. And it reminded me of when I've gone through a million thousand insane fucked up things that I've gone through in my life that you would never even believe it if I told you like the half of them. I've always been like, I just want somebody to be protective of me almost, and to be like looking out for me. Like I'm always looking out for myself, which is good and fine, and I should be looking out for myself, but I'm always looking out for everybody else too. And I was like, I just like, I would always be like, I know I'm going to get through this and I know I'm strong, but I'm sick of people saying you're going to be okay because you're so strong. I want somebody to help make this okay for me. I don't want it to always have to be me. And Miles did that for her, and that is when I fell in love with him. And I was like, oh my God, like that is what I was always looking for. And I just loved it. So I'm going to read off these quotes now. And I don't know if I'm going to like elaborate on them, but these are the quotes that stuck out to me. And I was like rereading them, and like, it's just this whole part was so meaningful to me. But then also like the comedic relief of Starfire was like insane. So the first quote I said, Daphne says, I like seeing him like this. I also resent it and wonder for the millionth time in my life why mom and I never inspired this kind of attention or commitment. Then Daphne says, I hate that I feel guilt right now. I don't want to feel like dad can still trigger that in me. Like all I want is to make him happy, make him proud, earn his shine. He's being so nice. Why am I upset? When he's nice, it's hard to be mad at him, and you are, so then you feel bad about it. And then that was between her and Miles, and this one's also between her and Miles. Oh my God, I'm like gushing again. So Daphne says, I can hold my own. And Miles says, I know, I just don't want you to feel like you have to. I feel like I'm going to cry. Like all of that. I loved it so much. But then, of course, our girl Starfire's here for the comedic relief. So they have like this whole day out. All that stuff happens. And then Starfire says, you can call me mom. And I was hysterical laughing. Like, I was like, who is this woman? And then Miles and her say that they're best friends. I loved that. And because of all of this chaos with her dad, she forgets Ashley's birthday. She had set up this whole big day with her and she forgot it. And honestly, I was like pissed at Daphne too for doing that. Like, that's really fucked up. And then I said, I hate the third act breakup. Like, why? Can we just never do them? And it happens because, of course, Peter and Petra call off the wedding, which actually pissed me off. You're going to fuck up everyone's lives because you decide you need to be together. At least get married. It's so like Tom Sandoval and Raquel. Like, I mean, I'm glad Rachel, Raquel got help and like saw the evil that is Tom Sandoval. But it's like in the beginning when Sandoval first broke, I was like, all right, if you're going to do all this, you guys might as well get married and be together forever. So Peter comes back to her though. And he wants her back. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, no. Also, because like we love Miles now at this point, but like, what is wrong with you? Like, you can't just do that. So I was very proud of her for how she handled that with Peter, and that she didn't take him back, let alone she didn't want him back. And then I wrote in a quote, there will always be a Petra. And I think this was referring to how there's always someone like shinier, more beautiful, whatever. And then I wrote in a quote, but that doesn't mean I don't love you, with a million exclamation points. And I don't remember why I wrote that. But the next note is, I hate the third act breakup, which I hate it so much I wrote it twice. So I'm assuming it has to do something with that. And basically the third act breakup happens because she finds out from like, so first Miles is like a no-show. Like, he's supposed to pick her up from work. He doesn't show up and she's so worried and she can't track him down. But then Peter comes and says, me and Petra broke up. I want to get back together. And she's like, fuck off. But he is like, Miles was with Petra all day. He helped her move out. So in her mind, she's like, he's getting back with her, which is a rational thought. But what actually happened is that because the dad left early, which was so fucked up. And I was like, I felt so bad for her because they had this great day. And it was like, and then he had to go and ruin it. But we find out then that, like, I wrote in all caps, he went to yell at her dad. Miles went to yell at her dad and then to bring him back. And he didn't come back. But the fact that he did that, I was like, oh my fucking God. And I wrote this quote and I don't remember who. Oh, I think her mom said this. Her mom said, you deserve a better dad. I wish I could give you that. And I wrote this quote down because it also resonated so much with me. Because my mom, had a great dad, and I'm happy for her. I never met him. He died when my mom was 21, so I never knew him. Sounds like a great guy. And my mom will always say, I had the best in the world. I had the best dad in the world. And my mom used to always say, I just wish you guys had what I had. And I would get into fights with her about this. And finally, I like said, after I went through a lot of therapy, I was like, you have to stop saying that because I am never going to have what you had. Also, you chose this man to procreate with. So what were we even thinking? But the fact that her mom also said that to her after I was already relating to it so much, I was like, oh my God, Emily Henry, like, how did you know? How did you know my whole life? And then so Miles went and yelled at the dad, like, obsessed. And then she tells her dad off. And I wrote that with a million exclamation points. And then I just wrote the word release because in her experience, it is so hard. And it feels like you've just bottled up your whole life forever. But when you finally burst and get it all out and get everything on the table, whether you walk away from it on a path to healing or you're never going to speak again, it is that release. I have felt it. And that is how you start to achieve peace, which that's whichever way it's going to go. And I was so happy for her that she did that. So now it's finally the day of the readathon, which she planned this giant readathon for the town. It's like the big like final event of the book, and she's planning on leaving town after it. And everyone starts getting a stomach virus then. So they rope people in from the town to help, and so many people from the town come, and so does Miles. And I love that he still showed up. The next note I wrote, now we're at the readathon, which I was like, I want to go to a readathon. I went to they called it like a stay awake-a-thon, but it wasn't, it was in my high school. Like it wasn't a part of the library, but I was like, I'm gonna go to an all-night readathon. Um, I mentioned this in the beginning, but this is when Maya and the kid Ethan, they're reading Rules of Magic together and they start forming a friendship. And I just thought it was so, so cute. And then they get back together and she says to Miles, you're the reason for the word wonderful. And I was like, oh, God. And I said, I love that she's choosing him and she's choosing herself. And then she Daphne says, because now Daphne's decided to stay in the town, and I think she moved out of his apartment. She didn't buy that fairy tale house though, but we find out in the final chapter of the book that they bought one similar to it and they're redoing it, which I was just like, oh, like I love that so much. But Daphne says, a second act I fell into and the home that I chose as much as it chose me. And I feel like that just sums up the whole book. And then they are talking about how they met and they say it's a funny story. And I love that so much. I gave it 5 stars, 5 giant fucking stars. My second 5-star read of the year. I loved it so much. I just talked about it for almost an hour. I loved it so much. Like, I'm so happy I loved it. And now I'm nervous because I'm so in every other one with her. So let's see what happens next year with the next one. But I loved it. And I hope that you guys did too. It is now 1 month later, which all of you listening, this is like the magic of like, I'm a time traveler right now, basically. As you guys know, I read and recorded that episode before, like way before, a month ago, literally, because I had read the book. I didn't want to wait to read the book. I already explained this, I'm sure. I haven't re-listened to what I said a month ago, but I had read the book when it came out and I recorded the episode right away. So that way my thoughts were super fresh. It is a month later. I am still obsessed with this book. I still love it. I've had so much fun. I've been going to a bunch of book events and I've loved chatting to people about it in real life and over Instagram DM. And yeah, so I now am going to play some thoughts from Maria, who kindly sent in a voice note, and then we're going to announce the June book club picks. So here are her thoughts.
So I thought Funny Story was a pretty cute rom-com. I really enjoyed the premise. I thought the idea um of two people pretending to fake date to get back at their exes was brilliant. And it made me really excited to pick up the book. I really related to Daphne as a character, being an introvert myself, and related to her struggle of figuring out who she was after getting out of a long-term relationship and really struggling to make friends and kind of not always liking herself. So I loved her and found her really relatable as a character. And I also thought that the romance between her and Miles was really fun, because these are two people who you would think would really not click. They have nothing in common, and when they start spending more time together, and they fit. So I loved that. What didn't always work for me is sometimes, in my opinion at least, Emily Henry dug a little too deep into the rom-com tropes, and some parts just felt unnecessary. Like the farmers market scene, I remember reading it. I was like, what? Why did cute, but almost, for me at least, slowed down the pace. But overall, I think this makes for a really fun summer read. And for what it is, which is basically a rom-com, I thought it was pretty well done.
Thank you so much for submitting your thoughts. I love when you guys do that. It just helps to, I feel like it adds an extra fun layer, and you guys get to hear from somebody that isn't me. Now, without further ado, and I have to just acknowledge this for people watching on video, I am completely whitewashed now because the sun has just come in, because it is summer now, and I don't know how, I forget every year how the light in my room moves. And those of you listening on audio are like, what the heck are you talking about? But I look like a ghost. Okay, I'm so excited. Our June book club pick is, I forgot the title, so I just had to look. It is Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth. I was going to read this in May, and I was like, do you know what? I feel like this would be so much fun to do for the first book club of the summer. There's a pool on the cover. It is giving such summery vibes. I love reading Sally Hepworth in the summer. I think I've read all of her books. There might be a few old ones that I haven't, but they're just like these really fun suspense thriller type books. They're super quick reads. They make for the best beach or pool reads. I will be reading this by the pool very soon, hopefully. So please, well, not please, but please join me for our June book club on June 27th, which is so crazy because a month later is my 30th birthday. And to have your thoughts to me, either send an audio message via email to professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com, or DM your thoughts to professionalbookgirl or kredwhat by June 25th. So that way I can add them just like we've done. I think we've had thoughts on every book club episode so far. So I'm excited to do a thriller again. I've obviously loved doing every single book club episode. It's really fun for me to talk about books like this, but the Listen for the Lie one, it just was a lot of fun to kind of break down a thriller. I don't know, I feel like so far that's been my favorite genre for book club. So I'm excited to do a thriller. Let me know, actually, because I'll probably start thinking about July and August book club soon. So let me know if there's anything that you would like for me to include. There are so many great new books coming out this summer. I did a post on KRedWhat breaking down all of them, which I had listed off on a previous episode of the show, but they're all listed on KRedWhat if you want to screenshot and save it so you remember what's on my radar. What genre do we want? Backlist, new title? I don't know. Thank you so much for listening. I hope if you've made it this far, I hope you also enjoyed Funny Story by Emily Henry. I feel like it was a really great book club pick. I hope you enjoyed my rambles. I remember, because it's a month later now and I haven't edited yet, so I haven't re-listened to it, but I remember I got deep about my family and my dad. So that's just classic Kayla, honestly. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure you're following, subscribe to every gets you on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Follow me on Instagram at KRedWhat. Follow the show at Professional Book Girl. Leave a rating and review. It would make me very happy, and I will see you on Monday.